My name is Juliet Blackwell, and I'm 61 years old. I watched my own daughter, my baby girl, throw a leather suitcase into the river and drive away like nothing happened. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I thought maybe the grief, the loneliness, the endless nights in this empty house had finally driven me mad. But then I heard it, a muffled sound coming from inside that suitcase. A sound that made my blood turn to ice. I ran. God help me, I ran faster than I've run in 20 years, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the sound of the water, drowned out everything except that terrible, muffled cry. When I pulled that suitcase out of that freezing water and forced the zipper open with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling, what I saw inside made my knees give out. Made me collapse right there in the mud and the reeds, made me scream until my throat was raw. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share will stay with you forever. It will haunt you the way it haunts me. Every single night. But to understand that terrible moment by the river, I need to take you back a few months. Back to when I still believed I knew my daughter. Back to when I still thought love was enough. I live in a small town called Riverside, and yes, the irony of that name isn't lost on me now. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are supposed to be impossible to keep, where your neighbors wave at you from their porches and ask about your family at the grocery store. My house sits about 200 yards from the Clearwater River, a modest little cottage that my husband Thomas and I bought 35 years ago when we were young and full of dreams. Thomas died 3 years ago. Cancer. It ate through him like fire through paper, and when he was gone, this house became an echo chamber of memories. Every room whispered his name. Every shadow held his shape. But I had my daughter. I had Emma. Emma Rose Blackwell, named after Thomas's mother, born on a spring morning so beautiful it made me believe in God all over again. She was my everything. My reason for breathing after Thomas left me alone in this world. And I thought, God, I really thought, that I was hers too. Emma had always been driven. Even as a little girl, she had this fierce determination, this burning need to succeed that sometimes frightened me with its intensity. While other children were playing with dolls or riding bikes, Emma was reading books meant for kids twice her age, practicing piano until her fingers ached, studying spelling words until she could recite them in her sleep. Thomas used to joke that she got it from his side of the family, all those stubborn German ancestors who built empires out of nothing. I used to laugh and say she got it from both of us, from our combined refusal to ever give up on anything. She went to college on a full scholarship. Stanford. My baby girl, all the way across the country in California, studying business and economics and God knows what else. She graduated top of her class, got recruited by some big consulting firm in San Francisco, started making more money at 23 than Thomas and I had made in our entire lives combined. I was so proud. So impossibly, painfully proud. Every time she called, and the calls came less and less frequently over the years, I would brag to my neighbors about her success. About her apartment in the city, her important clients, her meteoric rise through the corporate ranks. But there was something else in those calls. Something I tried to ignore. A brittleness in her voice. A tremor beneath the confident words. An exhaustion that went deeper than just long hours at the office. When she came home for Thomas's funeral, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. And she barely cried. My husband was dead, her father was being lowered into the ground, and my daughter stood there like a statue, like something carved from ice, with dry eyes and a jaw so tense I thought her teeth might shatter. I asked her if she was okay. I asked her a dozen times during that terrible weekend. She said she was fine. She said she was just tired. She said work was demanding but rewarding, that she was happy, that everything was under control. And I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly that I swallowed every lie she fed me and asked for more. After the funeral, she went back to California. The calls became even less frequent. Weeks would go by with nothing but brief text messages: busy, talk soon, love you mom. I told myself she was building her life, chasing her dreams, doing exactly what we'd raised her to do. I told myself that empty nest syndrome was normal, that I needed to let go, that she was a grown woman who didn't need her mother hovering over her anymore. Then, 6 months ago, something changed. She called me on a Tuesday night, I remember, because Tuesdays were when I volunteered at the community center, teaching watercolor painting to seniors. I was just getting home, tired but content, when my phone rang. Emma's name on the screen made my heart leap the way it always did. But when I answered, when I heard her voice, that leap turned into a plunge. "Mom," she said, and there was something broken in that single word. Something shattered. "Mom, I need to come home for a while." I didn't ask questions. Didn't press her for explanations. I just said yes. Said she could stay as long as she needed. Said I would prepare her old room, that she should come right away if that's what she wanted. The relief in her voice when she thanked me made my chest ache. Made me realize that something had been terribly wrong for a very long time and I'd been too blind or too stupid or too afraid to see it. She arrived 3 days later. Friday afternoon, pulling up in a rental car because she'd apparently sold her BMW, that beautiful silver thing she'd been so proud of. She had 2 suitcases with her. One was new, cheap, the kind you buy at a discount store when you need something functional. The other was the leather one I'd given her for college graduation. Expensive, elegant, with her initials embossed on the side in gold. Herb. Emma Rose Blackwell. My baby girl. She looked terrible. Not just tired now, but haunted. Gaunt. Her clothes hung off her frame, and when I hugged her, when I pulled her into my arms the way I used to when she was small, I could feel every bone in her back. She felt like she might break. Like she might crumble into dust if I held her too tight. What happened? I asked her. Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong? I just need some time, she said. I just need to rest. To think. To figure things out. Did something happen at work? Did someone hurt you? She pulled away from me. Looked at me with eyes that were simultaneously desperate and distant. I quit my job, Mom. I quit everything. I can't do it anymore. I can't be that person anymore. I wanted to ask what person. Wanted to dig deeper, to extract every secret and fear and pain from her the way you draw poison from a wound. But she looked so fragile, so close to completely falling apart, that I just nodded. Told her it was okay. Told her she could stay as long as she needed, that we'd figure it out together, that everything would be all right. I'm such a fool. Such a blind, useless fool. Those first few weeks, she barely left her room. I'd hear her pacing at night, back and forth across the old wooden floorboards that creaked with every step. Sometimes I'd hear her crying, these awful, muffled sobs that she tried to hide in her pillow. I'd stand outside her door with my hand raised to knock, to go in and hold her the way I did when she was little and had nightmares. But something always stopped me. Some sense that she needed to be alone with whatever demons were chasing her. That if I pushed too hard, she might run again, might disappear back to California or somewhere even farther away where I couldn't reach her at all. During the day, she'd come down for meals but barely eat. She'd sit at the kitchen table where she used to do her homework, where we used to have Sunday breakfast as a family, and she'd push food around her plate while staring at nothing. I'd try to make conversation, ask about her friends, about whether she'd heard from anyone from high school, about whether she wanted to go into town with me to the farmer's market or the library. She'd give me one-word answers. Yes. No. Maybe. Her voice was flat and lifeless, like something had reached inside her and stolen her soul. I was worried. Terrified, actually. I started wondering if she was having some kind of breakdown, if I should call a doctor, maybe suggest therapy. But every time I worked up the courage to bring it up, she'd suddenly smile, this brittle, painful smile that never reached her eyes, and say she was feeling better, that she just needed a little more time. Then, about 4 weeks after she arrived, I noticed something. She'd started going out. Just short trips at first, drives along the river, walks through town, visits to the old coffee shop where she used to study in high school. She said it helped to remember simpler times, to reconnect with the place where she grew up. I was relieved. I thought maybe she was finally starting to heal, to come back to herself. But there was something off about these outings. Something secretive. She'd leave without telling me where she was going. She'd come back smelling like cigarette smoke even though she'd never smoked in her life. Once, I saw her sitting in her car in the driveway for almost an hour, just sitting there with her hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead like she was trying to work up the courage to go somewhere. Or to not go somewhere. And her room. God, her room. I only went in there once while she was out. I know, it's an invasion of privacy, but I was her mother and I was desperate to understand what was happening to my child. The room was obsessively neat. Everything is in perfect order. But there was something wrong about it. The closet door was padlocked. Padlocked. In my own house. And there were papers everywhere, notebooks filled with frantic handwriting, pages and pages of what looked like calculations or lists or plans, but all written in a kind of code I couldn't decipher. Phone numbers with no names attached. Addresses in cities I'd never heard of. And at the bottom of one page, written over and over again like a mantra or a prayer, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry for what? What had she done? What was she running from? I confronted her that night. Gently, carefully, because I was afraid of pushing her away but more afraid of losing her completely to whatever darkness had swallowed her. I told her I'd seen the notebooks. Asked her what was going on. Told her that whatever it was, whatever had happened, I was her mother and I loved her and she could tell me anything. She went pale. Then red. Then pale again. Her hands started shaking, that tremor I'd noticed at the funeral but worse now, so much worse. She stood up from the dinner table so fast her chair fell over backwards. And she screamed at me. Actually screamed. Said I had no right to go through her things, that she was an adult, that she didn't owe me any explanations. Said things that cut me deep, that I'd always been too nosy, too controlling, that I'd smothered her for years and that's why she'd had to escape across the country just to breathe. Then she stopped. Just stopped mid-sentence like someone had pressed pause on her. And she started crying. Not the muffled sobs I'd heard through her door at night, but huge, heaving cries that shook her whole body. She collapsed onto the floor right there in the kitchen and I rushed to her, held her while she sobbed into my shoulder the way she used to when she was 5 years old and was scared of thunderstorms. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry for what, baby? What happened? Please, just tell me what happened. But she wouldn't. Or couldn't. She just cried herself into exhaustion and then let me help her to bed like a child. And the next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Came down for breakfast with a calm expression and asked if I wanted to go for a walk by the river. Like the previous night had been a dream. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. I should have pushed harder. Should have insisted on answers. Should have forced her to see a doctor or called one of her friends from California or done something, anything other than what I did, which was nothing. which was to smile and say yes to the walk and pretend that everything was normal because pretending felt easier than facing whatever terrible truth was lurking beneath the surface. 3 days later was when it happened. The day that destroyed everything. The day that killed the last remnants of the woman I used to be. It was a Thursday. October 19th. The kind of autumn day that makes you grateful to be alive, crisp air, leaves turning gold and crimson, that peculiar clarity to the light that makes everything look like a painting. I'd been in the garden all morning, cutting back the roses before the first frost, thinking about making Emma her favorite soup for dinner. Butternut squash. She'd loved it as a child, would eat bowl after bowl until her stomach hurt. I heard the car before I saw it. The sound of tires on gravel, moving fast. Too fast. My heart did this strange little skip because I thought maybe Emma had gone into town without telling me again, and now she was back. But when I looked up, hands still covered in dirt from the garden, I saw her rental car come screeching up the driveway. Not parking carefully the way she usually did, but jerking to a stop at an angle, half on the grass, like she'd forgotten how to drive properly. She got out of the car and that's when I knew. That's when every instinct I had as a mother started screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. Her face was white as bone. Her eyes were wild, not just frightened but feral, like a trapped animal. Her whole body was shaking so violently I could see it from 20 feet away. And there was something on her hands. Something dark. Something that looked like. No. I couldn't let myself think about it. I wouldn't let myself name it. She moved to the trunk of the car. Popped it open with fumbling hands that took 3 tries to work the latch. And then she pulled out the suitcase. The leather one. The one I'd given her for graduation with her initials embossed in gold. Herb. My baby girl. It looked heavy. Too heavy. The way she struggled with it, the way she had to use both hands and brace her legs to pull it out of the trunk. My mind was racing, trying to understand what could be in there, why she looked like she was barely holding herself together, why there was that stain on her hands that my brain still refused to identify. She didn't see me. Didn't notice me standing there in the garden with my pruning shears hanging limp in my hand. All her attention was focused on the suitcase and the river. The river that ran behind our house, peaceful and eternal, the river where Emma used to skip stones as a little girl, where Thomas used to take her fishing on Sunday mornings. She started walking toward it. Not the careful, measured walk of my daughter, but a strange, staggering gait like someone in a nightmare. Like someone who'd forgotten how their own legs worked. Dragging that suitcase behind her, its wheels catching on the grass and rocks, making her stumble but never stopping, never slowing down. I should have called out to her. Should have run over and asked what she was doing. Should have stopped what happened next. But I was frozen. Completely frozen. My body wouldn't obey my mind. I could only stand there and watch as my daughter, my baby, my Emma, dragged that suitcase to the river's edge. She looked around then. Quick, furtive glances like a thief checking for witnesses. But she was looking the wrong direction. Didn't think to look toward the garden. Didn't see her mother standing there with dirt under her fingernails and roses at her feet. And then she lifted the suitcase. Struggled with it, the weight of it clearly more than she'd anticipated. She had to swing it back once, twice, 3 times to build momentum. And on the 3rd swing, she let it go. I watched it arc through the air. Watched the afternoon sunlight catch on the gold initials. Herb. Watched it hit the water with a splash that seemed too loud, too violent, too final. Watched it float for just a moment, that expensive leather holding it up, holding it on the surface like it was trying to resist, trying to refuse what was being done to it. And then I heard it. A sound that will echo in my mind until the day I die. A muffled cry. Faint but unmistakable. Coming from inside the suitcase. A sound that was alive. That was desperate. That was drowning. Time did something strange then. Slowed down and sped up simultaneously. I saw Emma standing on the riverbank, saw her freeze at the sound, saw her hands fly to her mouth. Saw the expression on her face, horror and relief and anguish all mixed together into something I'd never seen on a human face before. And then she turned. Just turned away from the river, from the sinking suitcase, from that terrible muffled cry. Turned and ran back to her car like the hounds of hell were chasing her. I was running too. Dropped the pruning shears and ran toward the river, my legs finally obeying me, moving on instinct older and deeper than thought. I was screaming, "Emma! Emma, what did you do? What's in there? Emma!" But she didn't stop. Didn't even look back. She got in her car and peeled out of the driveway with tires squealing and gravel spraying, and I knew at that moment that I'd lost her. Whatever happened next, my daughter was gone. The girl I'd raised, the woman I'd loved for 33 years, had disappeared and left this stranger in her place. This stranger who could throw something living into a river and drive away. But I couldn't think about that. Not yet. Because there was that sound. That muffled crying from inside the suitcase that was now sinking, slipping beneath the surface of the water that looked so peaceful, so innocent in the afternoon light. The water that was swallowing whatever was in that case, pulling it down into darkness and cold and death. I hit the water running. Didn't even pause at the edge, just plunged right in. The cold was a physical shock, like being punched in the chest. October river water in Montana is maybe 10 degrees above freezing. It stole the breath from my lungs and made my heart stutter. But I kept going, kept pushing forward through the current that was stronger than it looked, grabbed at my legs and tried to pull me under. The suitcase was maybe 15 feet from shore. Sinking fast now, the leather finally saturated enough to lose its buoyancy. I could see it beneath the surface, dark and ominous, tilting as it descended. And I could still hear it. Fainter now, but still there. Still crying. Still alive. I'm 61 years old. I haven't swum in years. I have arthritis in my left hip and high blood pressure that my doctor is constantly nagging me about. But at that moment, I was young again. Strong again. I dove under the surface, eyes open despite the murky water that burned them, arms reaching, fingers stretching for the handle of that suitcase. I missed it on the first try. The current pushed me past it and I had to fight my way back, lungs already starting to burn. I grabbed for it again and this time my fingers closed around the leather handle. It was so heavy. So impossibly heavy. I tried to pull it up but the weight of it, the water in it, dragged me down instead. My feet couldn't touch the bottom here. I was in over my head in every possible way. But I could still hear the crying. Muffled by water and leather and whatever else was in there, but present. Real. Alive. And that sound gave me strength I didn't know I had. I kicked hard, pulling the suitcase with both hands now, fighting the river and gravity and my own exhaustion. My lungs were screaming. My vision was starting to go dark at the edges. But I kept going. Kept pulling. Kept fighting toward the surface, toward the light, toward air and life and truth. I broke through gasping, choking, barely able to keep my head above water. But I had the suitcase. I had it clutched against my chest and I wasn't letting go. I kicked toward shore, toward the muddy bank where reeds grew thick and cattails swayed in the breeze. It took forever. Felt like hours even though it was probably less than a minute. Every movement was agony. The cold had seeped into my bones, making my muscles sluggish and uncoordinated. But I kept going. Kept fighting. Because of that sound. Because something alive was in this case and it was running out of time and I couldn't let it die. Couldn't let whatever Emma had done be final and irreversible. I reached the shallows and my knees hit mud. I crawled the last few feet, dragging the suitcase with me, until I was on solid ground. My hands were shaking so badly from the cold and shock and adrenaline that I could barely work the zipper. It was stuck. Swollen from the water. I pulled at it with fingers that had gone numb, whimpering with frustration and fear. It wouldn't budge. Wouldn't open. I could still hear the sound from inside, weaker now, more desperate. Running out of air. Running out of time. I looked around wildly for something to help, something to cut or pry or break the zipper. My pruning shears. Where were my pruning shears? I'd dropped them in the garden. Too far away. I'd never make it back in time. So I used my hands. Tore at the zipper with my fingernails until they broke and bled. I used my teeth when my hands failed. Becoming an animal, a wild thing motivated only by the desperate need to get inside that case, to save whatever was dying in there because of my daughter, because of my failure to see what she'd become. The zipper finally gave way. Burst opened under my desperate assault. And I pulled the case open, pulled it wide, and looked inside. And what I saw made my knees give out. Made me collapse right there in the mud and the reeds. Made me scream until my throat was raw and my voice was gone and there was nothing left but this howling grief that had no words, no shape, nothing but pain. Because inside the suitcase was a baby. A newborn baby. Blue from cold and lack of oxygen, tiny arms and legs barely moving, eyes closed, mouth open in a silent cry. My grandchild. My daughter's baby. A baby I never knew existed. A baby Emma had hidden from me through her entire pregnancy. A baby she had just tried to drown in the river behind my house. I pulled the infant out of that suitcase with shaking hands, barely able to grasp the tiny, slippery body. It was so small. So fragile. So impossibly, heartbreakingly real. I turned it over and hit its back the way I remembered from some long ago CPR class, trying to clear the water from its lungs. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. No response. The little body was limp in my hands, turning bluer by the second. No, I heard myself saying. No, 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 no. Please. Please, God, please. Not this baby. Not my grandbaby. Please. I tilted the tiny head back and breathed into the infant's mouth. Such a small mouth. My breath seemed too much, too strong, like it might damage those delicate lungs. But I had to try. I had to do something. I breathed again. Pressed on the tiny chest with 2 fingers the way I'd seen on television. Breathed again. Pressed again. Developed a rhythm, a desperate pattern. Breathe, press, breathe, press. Come on, baby. Come on. Live. Choose life. Choose to stay. I don't know how long I did this. Time had stopped meaning anything. There was only the pattern. The rhythm. The desperate prayer was physical. Breathe, press, breathe, press. My own lungs are burning. My arms are shaking with exhaustion. Water dripped from my hair and clothes into the mud. The afternoon sun shining down like nothing terrible was happening, like this was just another ordinary autumn day in Riverside, Montana. And then the baby coughed. A tiny, wet, miraculous cough. And its eyes opened. And it took a breath, a real breath, pulling air into its own lungs without my help. And it cried. Actually, I cried. A thin, reedy wail that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I burst into tears. Clutched the baby to my chest, trying to warm it with my own soaked body, trying to share what little heat I had left. You're okay, I sobbed. You're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Not sure if I was talking to the baby or myself or God or the universe. Just needing to say it. Needing to make it true through repetition. The baby was a girl. I could see that now. A little girl with a wisp of dark hair plastered to her skull and eyes that were Emma's eyes, the same shape, the same color. My granddaughter. My blood. Born to my daughter and then abandoned by her. Thrown away like garbage. Left to die in the cold, dark water. What kind of monster had Emma become? What had happened to her that could drive her to this? What pain or fear or desperation could push a mother to try to murder her own child? I needed help. I needed to get this baby somewhere warm and safe, needed doctors and ambulances and police and all the machinery of society that exists to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But my phone was in the house and I didn't think I could stand, let alone walk. My legs had turned to jelly. My whole body was shaking with cold and shock. So I just sat there in the mud with my granddaughter in my arms and I screamed. Screamed for help at the top of my ruined voice, hoping someone would hear, someone would come. And someone did. My neighbor, Harold Chen, a retired postal worker who lived 3 houses down. He must have heard my screaming or seen what happened from his yard. He came running, this 70-year-old man with a bad knee, came running like a sprinter. I saw the horror on his face when he reached me, when he saw the baby, when he saw the open suitcase with water pouring from it and the gold initials ERB catching the light. "Oh my God," he said. "Oh my God, Juliet. What is that?" "Call 911, I managed to say. "Call them now. The baby needs a hospital. Hypothermia. Nearly drowned. Hurry. Please hurry." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made the call while I held my granddaughter and tried to keep her warm, tried to shield her from the wind that had picked up, tried to make up for what her own mother had done to her. I could hear Harold talking to the dispatcher, his voice high and strained, giving our address, saying words like infant and near drowning and hurry, please hurry. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. 7 minutes that felt like 7 years. The EMTs took over with practiced efficiency, wrapping my granddaughter in heated blankets, checking her vitals, starting in 4 in a vein so small I could barely see it. They were talking to each other in medical jargon I didn't understand, but their faces were grim. Concerned. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, tried to get me to let go of the baby so they could work on her properly. But I couldn't. Physically, I could not make my arms release her. This child who'd been in my life for less than 15 minutes and was already more precious to me than my own life. "Ma'am," the EMT said gently. "Ma'am, we need to treat her. We need to get her to the hospital. You can come with us, but you need to let us do our job. Please." I forced my arms to open. Watched them put my granddaughter on a tiny stretcher, so small it looked like a doll's bed. Watched them load her into the ambulance with movements that were quick but careful. One of them wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I hadn't even noticed I was still soaking wet, still shivering violently from the cold river water. "You should come too," he said. "You might have hypothermia. And we'll need to ask you some questions about what happened." I climbed into the ambulance on legs that barely worked. Sat on the bench next to where they'd secured my granddaughter's stretcher. I wanted to hold her tiny hand, but there were so many wires and tubes attached to her now that I was afraid to touch her, afraid I might disconnect something vital. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, I looked back at my house. At the river where it had happened. At the leather suitcase still lying open on the muddy bank, water still pouring from it, those gold initials glinting in the sun. Herb. Evidence now. Proof of attempted murder. Proof that my daughter, my baby girl, had tried to kill her own child. And sitting in that ambulance, listening to the beep of monitors and the chatter of EMT radios, watching this tiny life fight to survive, I felt something inside me break. Not the same kind of breaking that happened when Thomas died, that had been a clean break, a knife wound straight through the heart. This was different. This was shattering. A complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my family, my daughter, myself. Because how do you not see something like this? How do you live in the same house with someone for months and not know they're pregnant? Not knowing they're falling apart? Not know they're capable of something this monstrous? What kind of mother does that make me? What had I done wrong? Where had I failed so completely that my own daughter felt she couldn't come to me, couldn't tell me she was pregnant, couldn't ask for help? What kind of fear or shame or desperation had she been living with while I was downstairs cooking meals and tending my garden and pretending everything was fine? At the hospital, they rushed my granddaughter into the pediatric ICU. Doctors descended on her like a flock of concerned birds, running tests, adjusting equipment, speaking in low, urgent voices. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me, gently but firmly, and guided me to a different room. They checked me for hypothermia, wrapped me in heated blankets, gave me something warm to drink that tasted like cardboard but warmed my insides. And then the police came. 2 officers. A man and a woman, both young, both trying to look professional while barely hiding their shock at the story I told them. I described everything. The car. Emma's face. The suitcase. The river. The baby. I told them about the stains on Emma's hands that I now understood were blood. I told them about her behavior over the past months, the locked closet, the frantic notebooks, the apologies. I gave them everything I had because this child deserved justice and Emma deserved to be stopped before she could hurt anyone else. They asked me if I knew where Emma was now. I didn't. She'd driven away and I had no idea where she'd gone. But they assured me they'd find her. That they'd already put out an alert. That someone driving that erratically, that visibly distressed, would be easy to spot. And then the female officer asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Mrs. Blackwell, did you know your daughter was pregnant?" "No," I whispered. "I had no idea. No idea at all." "She lived with you for 2 months. How is that possible?" "I don't know," I said, and it came out as a sob. "I don't know. She wore baggy clothes. She kept to herself. I thought she'd lost weight, not gained it. I thought she was depressed, maybe having a breakdown. I never imagined. I never even considered. When was the last time you saw her before today?" "This morning. At breakfast. She seemed calm. Quiet, but calm. She said she was going to drive around, maybe visit some old friends. I thought she was getting better. Getting her life back together." The officer wrote all of this down in a little notebook, her face carefully neutral. But I could see the judgment in her eyes. Could see her thinking what I was thinking. What kind of mother doesn't notice her own daughter is pregnant? What kind of family is so broken that something like this can happen? They left me alone after that. Told me to stay available for more questions. Told me a detective would want to speak with me soon. And then I was by myself in that sterile hospital room, wrapped in blankets that couldn't touch the cold that had settled in my bones. A cold that had nothing to do with the river and everything to do with the knowledge that my daughter, my baby, my Emma, had become someone I didn't know. Someone I never knew. Someone capable of horrors I couldn't have imagined. I must have sat there for hours. Nurses came and went, checking my blood pressure, bringing me water, speaking in soft voices about shock and trauma. But I couldn't focus on any of it. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment of the past months, looking for signs I'd missed, clues I'd been too blind or too stupid to see. The baggy clothes weren't just baggy, they were maternity clothes in disguise. The weight loss I'd noticed in her face and arms wasn't depression, it was pregnancy redistributing her body mass. The nausea she'd mentioned a few times wasn't anxiety, it was morning sickness. The locked closet probably held baby supplies, evidence of a pregnancy she was hiding from everyone, including herself maybe. The frantic notebooks were probably plans, calculations, desperate attempts to figure out what to do. The trips into town weren't about healing, they were about prenatal vitamins or preparing for a birth she couldn't let anyone know about. How far along had she been when she arrived? Was she already pregnant when she came home, or did it happen after? Who was the father? Why hadn't she told anyone? Why hadn't she gotten help? And the biggest question, the one that made my stomach churn and my head pound, what had happened to make her capable of trying to kill her own newborn baby? Because Emma wasn't evil. I knew that. I knew my daughter, or at least I thought I did. She was ambitious, driven, sometimes cold, sometimes distant. But murderous? Capable of drowning an infant? That wasn't the girl I'd raised. That wasn't possible. Unless I never really knew her at all. Unless the Emma I thought I knew was just a mask, a performance she'd put on for 33 years while something dark festered underneath. Or maybe, and this thought was somehow even worse, maybe she'd broken. Maybe something had happened to her, some trauma or violation or unbearable pressure that had shattered her mind and left behind this hollow, desperate creature who could do the unthinkable. And if that was true, if my daughter was broken rather than evil, then I'd failed her even more completely. Because I was her mother and I should have seen it, should have felt it, should have known that my child was falling apart and caught her before she hit the ground. A doctor came in around 8 o'clock that night. Dr. Sarah Martinez, young, competent, exhausted. She told me that my granddaughter was stable. Critical but stable. The hypothermia had been severe but they'd warmed her slowly and carefully. Her lungs had water in them but they were responding to treatment. She'd been without adequate oxygen for an unknown period but initial tests didn't show obvious brain damage, though it was too early to know for certain. There was evidence of recent birth, the umbilical cord had been cut crudely, with something that wasn't surgical scissors. There was an infection starting where the cord had been tied off, but antibiotics were already working. The baby was small, maybe 5 pounds, but seemed to be full term or close to it. Can I see her? I asked. Dr. Martinez hesitated. She's in the NICU. Under police guard. Police guard? She's a baby. I know, Mrs. Blackwell. But there's an ongoing investigation. And until we know more about what happened, about who the father is, about your daughter's whereabouts. The baby is technically evidence. And potentially still in danger. In danger from what? From me? From whoever put her in that suitcase. We don't know if your daughter acted alone. We don't know if she might come back to finish what she started. We have to protect the child. The casual way she said it, finish what she started, made me want to scream. But she was right. As much as it killed me to admit it, she was right. Emma had tried to murder this baby once. Who's to say she wouldn't try again if given the chance? Who's to say I could stop her? Can I at least look at her? I pleaded. Through the window? I just need to see that she's okay. I pulled her out of that river. I brought her back to life. Please. I just need to see her. Dr. Martinez's face softened. Come with me. She led me through a maze of hallways, my borrowed hospital slippers making soft shuffling sounds on the linoleum. We passed other patients, other families, other tragedies playing out in fluorescent-lit rooms. Normal hospital things, broken bones, infections, surgeries. None of them knew what had happened at the river. None of them knew that in the NICU down the hall was a baby who shouldn't be alive, saved only by the coincidence of her grandmother being in the garden at exactly the right moment. The NICU was quiet except for the beeping of monitors and the soft whooshing of respirators. Dr. Martinez led me to a large window looking into a room full of isolates, those plastic boxes that held the tiniest, most fragile patients. She pointed to one in the corner. She's there. I pressed my face to the glass. My granddaughter was barely visible beneath the tangle of wires and tubes. She was so small. So impossibly small. But her chest was rising and falling steadily. Her tiny fists were clenched beside her head. She was alive. Fighting. Surviving despite everything that had been done to her. She's strong, Dr. Martinez said quietly. Stronger than she has any right to be. Most babies wouldn't have survived what she went through. The cold water, the lack of oxygen, the trauma of birth with no medical care. But she's fighting. She wants to live. Does she have a name? I asked. Not yet. Your daughter never registered a birth. We don't even know when exactly she was born. Sometime in the last 24 hours, we think. The cord was still fresh when she arrived. 24 hours. Which meant Emma had given birth yesterday, probably alone in her locked room while I was downstairs watching television or reading a book. Had labored and delivered a baby with no help, no pain medication, no medical supervision. Had cut the cord herself with God knows what. Had hidden the infant somewhere, in a closet? Under the bed, until she could figure out what to do. And then had decided the only solution was murder. Was to put her newborn daughter in a suitcase and throw her in a river. The enormity of it crushed me. I sank down onto a bench near the window, unable to hold myself up anymore. What kind of pain must she have been in? I whispered. What kind of terror? To do something like this? Dr. Martinez sat down beside me. Sometimes women experience postpartum psychosis. It can happen very quickly after birth, within hours sometimes. The hormonal changes, the stress, the physical trauma of delivery. It can cause hallucinations, paranoia, delusions. Women have killed their babies during psychotic episodes and had no memory of it afterwards. It's rare, but it happens. Is that what you think happened? That Emma was psychotic? I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. But it's possible. It would explain why someone with no history of violence could do something this extreme. The mind can break under the right circumstances, Mrs. Blackwell. Especially if there were other factors, depression, anxiety, trauma, isolation. Emma had been isolated. I realized that suddenly. For 2 months she'd been living in my house but completely alone. No friends visiting. No calls that I knew of. No job to go to. No purpose or structure or connection to the world. Just her and her secrets and whatever demons were chasing her. And I'd let it happen. Had respected her privacy. Had given her space. I had been so afraid of pushing her away that I'd left her completely alone with a pregnancy she couldn't acknowledge and a future she couldn't face. This is my fault, I said. No. Mrs. Blackwell, no. You saved that baby's life. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't seen what happened, she would have died. You're a hero. I'm not a hero. A hero would have prevented this. Would have seen the signs. Would have helped her daughter before it got to this point. Dr. Martinez put a hand on my shoulder. You can't think like that. You can't blame yourself for not knowing something your daughter went to great lengths to hide. All you can do now is be there for that baby. Because she's going to need you. Will they let me? Once they find Emma, once there's a trial, will they let me have her? I don't know how custody works in cases like this. But you're her grandmother. Your family. And you saved her life. That has to count for something. We sat there for a while longer, watching my granddaughter breathe. Watching her fight. Watching her live despite everything. And I made a promise to her right then, silently, through the glass. I promised that I would fight for her. That I would protect her. That I would make sure she grew up knowing she was wanted and loved and precious. That I would spend the rest of my life making up for what had been done to her. That she would never, ever doubt that she deserved to be alive. they found Emma 3 hours later. She'd made it almost to the Canadian border, about 200 miles north, before crashing her car into a ditch. She wasn't injured. Wasn't fleeing anymore. She was just sitting there behind the wheel, staring at nothing, when the state police arrived. She didn't resist. Didn't run. Just let them handcuff her and put her in the back of their cruiser like a sleepwalker going through the motions of a dream. They brought her back to Riverside and put her in the county jail. Charged her with attempted murder, child endangerment, and a list of other crimes I couldn't keep track of. Set her bail at $500,000, money she didn't have, money I didn't have, money that wouldn't have mattered anyway because I don't know if I would have posted it even if I could. Because my daughter had tried to kill her baby. My granddaughter. And I didn't know if I could trust her not to try again. The detective assigned to the case came to see me the next morning. Detective Marcus Webb, 40-something, tired-looking, with kind eyes that had seen too much. He asked me questions for 2 hours. Went over everything again. Asked about Emma's mental state, her relationships, her pregnancy, her behavior. Asked if I knew who the father was. I didn't. Asked if Emma had ever expressed any desire to harm the baby. She hadn't, because I hadn't known there was a baby to harm. Asked if I thought she was capable of violence. And I had to say yes, because I'd seen what she did, even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream no, not my daughter, not my baby girl. Detective Webb told me things I hadn't known. Things they'd found in Emma's room after getting a warrant to search the house. They'd cut the lock off the closet and found evidence of preparations for birth, towels, scissors, cord clamps ordered online. They'd found evidence of an attempted home abortion earlier in the pregnancy, pills she'd bought on the internet that hadn't worked. They'd found journals documenting her pregnancy, her fears, her desperation. Entries that showed she knew she was pregnant from almost the beginning but couldn't face it, couldn't deal with it, couldn't figure out what to do. Entries that showed the father was her boss at the consulting firm in California. A married man. A powerful man. A man who'd pressured her to get an abortion and then, when she waited too long, to simply disappear. To handle it herself. To make sure it never came to light because it would destroy his marriage, his career, his life. Reading those journal entries, or rather, hearing Detective Webb read them to me, I felt my heart break all over again for my daughter. She'd been trapped. Pregnant by a man who held power over her career and her reputation. Too ashamed to tell me. Too afraid to go to a clinic. Too far along for legal abortion by the time she finally accepted the reality. So she'd come home, hide herself away, and spiral deeper and deeper into despair until she'd convinced herself that the only way out was to give birth alone and then make the problem disappear. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. Understanding the why didn't change the what. She'd still put a living, breathing newborn baby into a suitcase and thrown her into a river. Had still walked away and left her to die. And I couldn't forgive that. Couldn't excuse it. Couldn't make it okay no matter how much I understood the desperation that drove her to it. They let me see Emma on the 3rd day. I didn't want to go. God, I didn't want to go. But Detective Webb said she was asking for me. Begging for me. And despite everything, despite the anger and the horror and the grief, she was still my daughter. I still loved her. Or I loved the memory of who she used to be. Or I loved the child she'd been before life broke her. I don't know. Love is complicated and messy and doesn't shut off just because it should. They brought me to a visiting room in the county jail. Gray walls. Metal table. Uncomfortable chairs bolted to the floor. And Emma on the other side of a plexiglass divider, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look like a stranger. She'd lost more weight. Her face was gaunt, hollow. Her eyes were red from crying but empty of everything else. She looked like a ghost. Like she'd already died but her body hadn't gotten the message yet. We picked up phones on either side of the glass. We looked at each other. And for a long moment, neither of us could speak. "Mom," she finally said, and her voice was so small, so broken. "Mom, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" The word came out harsh, angry. I couldn't help it. "You're sorry? Emma, you tried to kill your baby. You threw her in a river. You left her to drown. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover what you did." "I know." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I know, I know, I know. I'm a monster. I'm evil. I deserve everything they're going to do to me. But Mom, you have to understand, I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't myself. From the moment she was born, all I could think about was making her disappear. Making the whole nightmare disappear. I convinced myself that if she was gone, I could go back to my life. Could pretend none of it had happened. Could I forget? How could you forget? She's your daughter. Your baby. How could you look at her and want her dead?" "I didn't look at her." Emma's voice rose, becoming frantic. "I didn't let myself look at her. I wrapped her in a towel as soon as she was born and I put her in the closet because if I looked at her, if I saw her face, I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. And I had to do it, Mom. I had to. Because I couldn't raise a baby. I couldn't tell anyone about her. I couldn't let David find out she existed. I couldn't let her ruin everything." "David? Your boss? He said he'd destroy me if anyone found out. Said he'd make sure I never worked again. Said he'd tell everyone I was a liar, that I seduced him, that I was trying to trap him. And I believed him, Mom. I believed he could do it. He has that kind of power. That kind of money. That kind of influence. So you decided to murder your baby instead of standing up to him?" She flinched like I'd hit her. "I know how it sounds. I know there's no excuse. But I was so scared, Mom. I'm so tired. So alone. And I kept thinking that if I just made her disappear, everything would go back to normal. I could get my life back. Could be myself again. But she's not a problem to be solved, Emma. She's a person. A living, breathing human being who deserves to exist. Who deserves to be loved. And you tried to take that away from her before she even had a chance. Is she?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Is she alive? Please tell me she's alive." Part of me didn't want to answer. Wanted to let her suffer, wondering. But I'm not cruel, even if my daughter is. She's alive. No thanks to you. She's in the NICU, fighting for her life. She has pneumonia from the water in her lungs. She's malnourished because you didn't feed her. She's covered in wires and tubes and monitors. But yes, she's alive." Emma sobbed. Pressed her hand against the plexiglass like she could reach through it and touch me. "Thank God. Thank God. Mom, can you tell her I'm sorry? Can you tell her that I wasn't myself? That I never wanted to hurt her?" "No." "What?" I said no. "I'm not telling her anything about you. When she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the truth, that her mother tried to kill her and her grandmother saved her life. But I'm not making excuses for you. I'm not helping you feel better about what you did. Mom, please. I love you, Emma. God help me, I still love you. But I can't forgive this. I can't look at you and see my daughter anymore. All I see is someone who threw a baby in a river. All I see is someone who chose her career, her reputation, her comfort over her own child's life. And I don't know how to reconcile that with the girl I raised. I don't know how to make sense of it. So I'm going to raise your daughter. I'm going to give her the love you couldn't. And I'm going to make sure she knows that even though her mother didn't want her, she was wanted. It is wanted. Will always be wanted. By me. You can't take her away from me. I'm not taking her. You threw her away. I'm just picking up what you discarded. Emma was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Mom, please. Please don't do this. I made a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. But I can change. I can be better. When I get out, when I've served my time. You tried to murder a baby, Emma. Your baby. You're not getting out for a very long time. And when you do, if you do, you're going to have to live with what you've done for the rest of your life. Just like I'm going to have to live with the knowledge that I raised someone capable of this. That somehow, somewhere, I failed you so completely that you thought killing your own child was an acceptable solution to your problems. I stood up. Prepared to hang up the phone and walk away. Leave my daughter behind that plexiglass divide where she belonged. Mom, wait. Her voice was desperate, breaking. What's her name? The baby. What did you name her? I paused. I looked at my daughter through the scratched, smudged barrier between us. Saw the desperation in her eyes. The need to know that some part of her still mattered. That she still had some connection to the child she'd tried to destroy. And I realized I was crying. I had been crying since I sat down, tears running down my face without me noticing. Grace, I said softly. I named her Grace. Because that's what she is. Grace that we didn't deserve. Grace that saved both of you, her from death and you from being a murderer. Grace that neither of us earned but received anyway. I hung up the phone before Emma could respond. I walked out of that jail and didn't look back. Because looking back would break me completely and I couldn't afford to be broken. Not now. Not when Grace needed me. The trial happened 6 months later. Emma pled guilty to attempted murder and child endangerment in exchange for a reduced sentence. 20 years with the possibility of parole after 12. The judge was harsh, unflinching. Called Emma's actions a betrayal of the most fundamental bond between mother and child. Said that while he understood she'd been in crisis, that wasn't an excuse for what she'd done. That plenty of women face difficult pregnancies, unsupportive partners, and professional pressures. Most of them don't try to drown their babies. I attended every day of the sentencing hearing. Sat in the front row. I watched my daughter stand before the judge in her orange jumpsuit and accept responsibility for her actions. Watched her cry. Watched her apologize. Watched her beg for mercy. And I felt nothing. Or not nothing, I felt everything. Too much. Grief and rage and pity and love and hatred all mixed together until I couldn't tell which emotion was which, couldn't separate the mother I was from the grandmother I'd become. I testified too. Told the court about finding Grace in the river. About pulling her out. About bringing her back to life. About the months since, raising my granddaughter while my daughter sat in jail awaiting trial. The prosecutor wanted me to be angry, vindictive. Wanted me to demand the maximum sentence. But I couldn't do it. Because she was still my daughter. Still the baby I'd held 33 years ago, the little girl who'd brought me dandelions from the yard, the teenager who'd practiced piano until her fingers bled. So I told the truth instead. Told the judge that Emma had been in crisis. That she'd made a terrible, unforgivable choice. That she needed to face consequences for what she'd done. But also that she needed help. Mental health treatment. Therapy. A chance to understand why she'd broken so completely and to rebuild herself into someone who could live with what she'd done. And I told him about Grace. About how she'd survived against all odds. About how she was thriving now, 6 months old, healthy and strong and beautiful. About how she smiled and laughed and grabbed at my fingers with her tiny hands. About how she deserved justice but also deserved a future where she wasn't defined by what had been done to her. Where she could grow up knowing she was loved and wanted and precious. The judge listened to all of it. And then he sentenced Emma to 20 years. Said that while he appreciated the complexity of the situation, the severity of the crime demanded serious consequences. Said that a baby had nearly died and that couldn't be ignored or minimized. Said that Emma would be eligible for parole after 12 years if she demonstrated genuine rehabilitation and remorse. 20 years. My daughter would be 53 when she got out. Grace would be 20. An adult. Living her own life. And Emma would have missed all of it, the first words, the first steps, the first day of school, the graduations, the heartbreaks, the triumphs. All of it is gone. Sacrificed on the altar of her fear and pride. I visit Emma once a month. I don't enjoy it. Don't look forward to it. But I do it because she's my daughter and because Grace deserves to know, when she's old enough, that I tried to maintain some connection between them. That I didn't let hate completely sever the bonds of family. Emma is different now. Quieter. Smaller somehow, like prison has compressed her into a denser, sadder version of herself. She asks about Grace every visit. Wants to know everything, what she's eating, whether she's sleeping through the night, if she's hitting her developmental milestones. And I told her. Not because she deserves to know, but because talking about Grace brings some light back into Emma's eyes. Reminds her that something good came from all of this tragedy. That her daughter lived despite her best efforts to kill her. Sometimes Emma asks if Grace can visit. If I can bring her to the prison so she can see her, meet her, apologize to her. And every time I say no. Because Grace is too young to understand. Because a prison visiting room is no place for a toddler. Because I'm not ready to explain to my granddaughter who the woman behind the glass is and what she did. Maybe someday. When Grace is older. When she can understand the complexity of it all. When she can choose for herself whether she wants a relationship with the mother who tried to kill her. But not now. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Grace is 2 years old now. She has Emma's eyes and my husband's smile. She's smart, curious, and fearless in that way toddlers are. She loves books and music and playing in the river, yes, the same river where she almost died. I was terrified the first time she wanted to go near the water, thinking I'd have a panic attack and pull her away. But she was so happy, splashing and laughing, throwing stones and chasing minnows. And I realized that the river hadn't tried to kill her. Emma had. The river was just water, flowing the way it had flowed for millions of years. Indifferent to human tragedy. Beautiful and deadly and completely neutral. So I let her play. Watched her carefully, never let her out of my sight, but let her enjoy the water. Because she deserves joy. Deserves normalcy. Deserves a childhood that isn't overshadowed by what happened to her before she was old enough to remember. She calls me Mama. Not Grandma or Grammy or any of the traditional names. Just Mama. Because that's what I am to her. I'm the one who feeds her and bathes her and reads her bedtime stories. I'm the one who kisses her scraped knees and wipes her tears and celebrates her victories. I'm the one who gets up with her in the middle of the night when she has bad dreams. I'm her mother in every way that matters, even if I'm technically her grandmother. Some days I look at her and I can't breathe from the love I feel. This tiny person who survived impossible odds. Who fought her way back from death. Who brings light into my life in a way I didn't think was possible after losing Thomas. She saved me as much as I saved her. Gave me purpose when I thought my purpose was over. Gave me hope when I thought hope was gone. Other days I look at her and all I can see is what Emma did. The suitcase. The river. The tiny blue body in my arms. And I'm filled with rage so intense it frightens me. Rage at Emma for being so weak, so selfish, so broken. Rage at David, the father who pressured her and then abandoned her. Rage at myself for not seeing what was happening, for not preventing the tragedy. Rage at the world for being the kind of place where women feel so trapped and desperate that murder seems like a viable option. But mostly, when I look at Grace, I just feel grateful. Grateful that I was in the garden that day. Grateful that I saw what happened. Grateful that the river wasn't deeper or the current stronger. Grateful that Harold heard me screaming and called for help. Grateful for every tiny coincidence and decision that led to Grace surviving. Because the alternative, a world without her in it, is unbearable to contemplate. People in town know what happened, of course. Can't keep secrets in a place like Riverside. They're kind about it, mostly. Offer to babysit. Bring by casseroles and hand-me-down clothes. Tell me I'm doing a wonderful thing, raising my granddaughter after such trauma. But I can see the judgment in some of their eyes. The questions they're too polite to ask out loud. How could you not know? What kind of mother doesn't notice her daughter is pregnant? Did you see warning signs and ignore them? Could you have stopped this? And the answer is yes. Yes to all of it. I should have known. Should have noticed. Should have pushed harder for answers. Should have broken down that locked closet door instead of respecting Emma's privacy. Should have forced her to see a doctor, a therapist, anyone who might have helped her. Should have been a better mother. Should have done better. But I can't change the past. Can't undo what was done or unsee what I saw. All I can do is move forward. Raise Grace. Love her fiercely. Teach her that she matters, that her life has value, that she was wanted even if her mother couldn't want her. Make sure she grows up knowing that love exists, that family means something, that the circumstances of her birth don't define who she is or what she can become. Some nights, after I put Grace to bed and the house is quiet, I sit by the river. The same spot where it happened. Where I pulled that suitcase out of the water and found my granddaughter dying inside. I don't know why I go there. Maybe it's some kind of penance. Maybe it's a way of processing what happened. Maybe I'm just punishing myself for not being the mother Emma needed me to be. I think about the choices Emma made. The lies she told. The secrets she kept. The desperate calculus that led her to decide that killing her baby was preferable to asking for help. And I try to understand. Try to find some way to forgive her, if not for what she did then at least for being human and fallible and broken. Because aren't we all broken in some way? Aren't we all carrying damage and making mistakes and hurting the people we love? But then I think about Grace. About her tiny body limp in my arms. About her blue lips and closed eyes. About how close we came to losing her. And the forgiveness evaporates. Replaced by rage and grief and this terrible, aching confusion about how love and hate can exist simultaneously in the same heart. How I can love my daughter and hate what she did. How I can mourn the loss of the relationship we had while being grateful she's locked away where she can't hurt Grace again. Sometimes I talk to Thomas. Out loud, sitting by the river, knowing I probably look crazy to anyone who might see me. I tell him about Grace. About how she has his smile and his stubborn determination. About how she's learning to count and knows all her colors and can sing the alphabet. I tell him about Emma. About the trial and the sentence and the visits to prison that leave me feeling gutted and empty. I tell him how much I miss him. How much easier this would be if he were here to share the burden. How unfair it is that he died just before everything fell apart, leaving me to handle it alone. And I ask him questions I know he can't answer. Did we do something wrong? Did we push Emma too hard? Should we have seen signs that she was struggling? Could we have prevented this? I run through our parenting in my mind, looking for the mistake, the moment where we failed her. The crack in the foundation that let the darkness in. But I can't find it. We weren't perfect parents, no one is. But we loved her. I supported her. Gave her every opportunity. Taught her right from wrong. And somehow that wasn't enough. Somehow she still became someone who could put her baby in a suitcase and throw her in a river. Maybe that's the hardest part. Not the trauma of that day, though God knows that was terrible enough. Not the shock of discovering Emma's secret pregnancy or the horror of realizing what she'd done. But the knowledge that you can do everything right and still end up here. That love isn't always enough. That even when you give everything you have, your child can still break in ways you can't fix. That the world is cruel and random and sometimes it destroys people for no reason at all. Grace will ask questions eventually. She already asks where her mommy is. I tell her that her mommy is away right now but loves her very much. It's a lie. Or a half-truth. Emma says she loves Grace. Says she thinks about her constantly. Says she regrets what she did more than anything she's ever regretted. But I don't know if that's love. I don't know if you can love someone and also try to murder them. Maybe in Emma's mind, she was doing what she thought was best. Maybe she'd convinced herself that a quick death was better than a life of being unwanted, of being a burden, of growing up knowing she was a mistake. But that's not love. Love doesn't drown babies. Love doesn't throw people away. Love fights. Love sacrifices. Love chooses life even when life is hard and terrifying and overwhelming. When Grace is older, I'll tell her the truth. Not all of it, not the graphic details, but enough that she understands what happened and why she lives with her grandmother instead of her mother. I'll tell her that her mother was sick, that her mind was broken, that she made a terrible choice in a moment of crisis. I'll tell her that mental illness is real and devastating and can make people do things they would never do when they're healthy. I'll tell her that her mother is serving time for what she did and that justice was served. But I'll also tell her that she was wanted. That I wanted her. That the moment I pulled her out of that river, she became mine in a way that transcends biology and law. That I chose her. Choose her. I will keep choosing her every day for the rest of my life. And I'll tell her that she survived for a reason. That sometimes God or fate or the universe or whatever you believe in saves people because they have a purpose. Because they're meant to do something important. Because the world needs them. I don't know what Grace's purpose is yet, she's only 2. But she's here. She's alive. She fought death and won. And that has to mean something. Maybe she'll grow up to help other children like her. Maybe she'll become a doctor or a social worker or an advocate for women in crisis. Maybe she'll just live a normal, happy life, and maybe that's purpose enough. To survive what should have killed her and to thrive anyway. To prove that trauma doesn't have to define you. That you can start life in the worst possible way and still become someone strong and whole and good. Or maybe I'm putting too much pressure on her. Maybe she doesn't need a grand purpose. Maybe it's enough that she's here, that she's loved, that she gets to experience this strange, beautiful, terrible world. Maybe survival itself is the victory and everything else is just a bonus. I don't have answers. Don't have wisdom. Don't have any profound insights about motherhood or family or love or forgiveness. All I have is this: I'm 63 years old and I'm raising my 2-year-old granddaughter because my daughter tried to kill her. I visit my daughter in prison once a month even though it breaks my heart every time. I sit by the river where it happened and try to make sense of something that will never make sense. And I keep going because Grace needs me to keep going. Because she deserves a grandmother who doesn't fall apart. Who stays strong. Who loves her unconditionally and shows her that the world, despite everything, is worth living in. Some people have asked me how I can forgive Emma. How I can still love her after what she did. And the truth is I don't know if I have forgiven her. Don't know if forgiveness is even possible for something like this. But I also can't stop loving her. Can't turn off 33 years of being her mother. Can't erase the memory of holding her as a baby, of watching her grow, of being so proud of everything she accomplished. She's my daughter and she's a monster, and somehow both of those things are true at the same time. And I have to live with that contradiction. I have to hold both realities in my heart simultaneously. Have to love the child she was while hating what she became. Have to mourn the loss of her while celebrating Grace's survival. It's exhausting. Soul-crushing. Some days I don't think I can do it anymore. Don't think I have the strength to keep all these pieces together. But then Grace smiles at me or laughs at something silly or falls asleep in my arms with her little hand clutching my shirt. And I remember why I'm doing this. Why do I have to keep going? Because she's worth it. Worth all the pain and confusion and heartbreak. Worth the sleepless nights and the emotional turmoil and the weight of carrying this terrible secret. Worth everything. My name is Juliet Blackwell, and I'm 63 years old. I watched my own daughter throw her newborn baby in a river. I pulled that baby out and brought her back to life. And now I'm raising her because her mother couldn't. Because someone had to choose life. Someone had to fight for this child who'd done nothing wrong except be born to the wrong woman at the wrong time. This is my story. Our story. Grace's story. It's not the story I wanted. Not the family I imagined. Not the life I planned. But it's the one we have. And we're making it work. Day by day. Moment by moment. Choice by choice. Because that's what love does. It survives. It adapts. It keeps going even when going feels impossible. It chooses life. Over and over again. No matter the cost. And I'll keep choosing life. For Grace. For Emma. For myself. Until the day I die. Because that's what mothers do.